Kia ora, and welcome. Episode 7 of the Dan Hooker podcast. A lot to talk about today, so we'll jump straight into it. We'll cover the UFC event that's just passed this weekend. I think this is one of the better cards in a while. Watching these fights, just the technical side of things, there was a lot to gain. There's a lot to gain if you're a young fighter. I'd like you to point some things out. You can go back and maybe rewatch the fights, and I feel like you'll pick up a lot of small details. Firstly, I want to shout out just Jamie Mullarkey. Unlucky on the decision. I thought he had it. I thought he had it with the takedowns in top position. But man, that kid's a junkyard dog. He gets out there, he gets himself into a fight. So shout out to Jamie Mullarkey. I'm sure he's going to be back after that. It's just a learning experience for him. And I'm excited to see him again. That was an incredible performance, and he should keep his head held very high for that. I'll get straight into the main card. Thomas Almeida versus Martinez. Now this is a good one because it's an open stance fight. Southpaw Martinez versus Orthodox fighter Almeida. So that's an open stance fight. Now this is a good example for Thomas Almeida. Just because your foot is on the outside in an open stance fight doesn't mean that you're in the right position. Like a lot of people think that. They think, oh, if I get my foot on the outside, then I'm going to win in the open stance fight, or I'm going to be in the superior position. But you can go back and rewatch that fight, and you learn that it's just not the case. Thomas Almeida had his foot on the outside, but it was at the complete expense of his stance. Like he's in his stance, he's stepping wide to get his foot out on the outside, but all he was doing was opening his stance up, and it was putting himself out of position. So he's the more experienced striker. This is a good example of a more experienced striker being out-positioned by just a fundamental southpaw. Fundamental southpaw in Martinez. He gave that foot position up, but he had the superior stance. His stance wasn't widened because of that. So it's a good fight to go back and rewatch, and I think you'll learn a lot. You learn that day one in your open stance. Oh, get your foot on the outside. Get your foot on the outside. Yes, get your foot on the outside, but not at the expense of your stance. Next fight we'll get into. James Krauss. I thought that was a very good performance. 10 days notice. He seems to be he loves to jump in on a short notice fight, and this was very one-sided. James Krauss just was the slicker of the two. His opponent, what's his opponent's name? Claudio Silva, big bomber, 14-1, 14-fight win streak, so not an easy beat by any of the stretch of the imagination. But he was just outclassed by the same move the entire fight. Open stance fight again. Silva would come over the top and swing heavy and swing big. James Krauss was just doing an incredible job of just sliding out of the way and dropping his two over the top, countering the two. Now, it was just strange. Like, well, James Krauss wasn't building off of that, or he wasn't like adding any kind of combination or second phase to dropping that two over the top. But I think that was due to the knee injury. He came back after round one and said, "Oh man, my knee's out of here." His coach, Mark Montoya, was saying, "Oh well, add this, work off of this." But he's just saying, "My knee's gone." So that'll be reason why he wasn't building. But I feel like there's no reason why Claudio could have done things a lot different. He just showed kind of his inexperience as a striker. It was very obvious when he was gonna punch and when he was going to kick. He's coming in, you could see him tense up, and it was very obvious when he was going to punch. Then when he's kicking, he's got his hands a bit wider, and he's stepping in. So when you just switch your stance like that and make it very obvious whether you're going to punch or whether you're going to kick, that makes it very easy to counter. I feel like if someone's fading back, dropping the two over the top, Claudio could have done a better job throwing the two, but then following it with a kick. That would have been able to shut down that fadeaway too. Then with James Krauss with the injured knee, I feel like that fight could have shifted very, very different. But James Krauss with the easy kind of just glide away to victory and Claudio Silva just not being able to make any kind of adjustments, which I think they were pretty simple adjustments had he made them. Now, I think did I bring up Jimmy Crute last weekend? I did. Man, I was like, when I was watching the fight, I was thinking, man, did I say Jimmy Crute last weekend? I'm pretty sure I did, but I apologize if I didn't speak highly enough of Jimmy leading into this fight. But Jimmy Crute versus, I have no idea how to say that name. Dominant victory. Dominant victory from Jimmy Crute. Straight, he was throwing the straight right down the middle. He was stepping in with a nice, beautiful, clean 1-2 down the middle, straight right down the middle. His opponent was well, technically he was right. He was pairing the right hand with his lead hand, which you can do. That's completely fine. In a close stance fight, he's throwing his right hand at you. You can parry it with your lead hand, but there has to be a distance. There has to be a bit of distance between you and your opponent. So then they can't keep changing that right hand to an overhand or something like that. So on the outside, his opponent was pairing it with the lead hand. But then when Jimmy was getting in a little closer, he was still trying to parry that right hand with his lead hand, which just opens up too many channels for the right hand now. He can now either throw it down the middle or come over the top. So fundamental error by Jimmy's opponent. Jimmy was able to capitalize. The kid's got some heat. That's a 2-fight win streak for Jimmy Crute. 2 first-round finishes. This will either move him into the rankings or 100% he gets a shot at someone ranked within that 10 to 15 of the light heavyweight division next. So big move, very impressive for Jimmy Crute, and I'm excited to see him fight a ranked opponent next. Without a doubt, 100% earned himself a shot at a ranked opponent. Next up, Andrade making her flyweight debut. So she's moving up from strawweight, and she looked like a hammer. That's the number one contender in that division. She moves up and stops it in the first round, but everything was there. That was a dominant performance. Kicks, punches, takedowns. She just showed her dominance all around the field. Hurt her with a body shot. Was able to follow up with only a few seconds left in the round, but dominant performance from Jessica Andrade. Getting into the main event, Ortega versus Korean Zombie. I almost caught the slapping. When Brian Ortega slapped Korean Zombie's manager for talking shit on Twitter. I just missed the slapping. That was he slapped him during the Ioane and Jacek Zhang Weili title fight when Israel fought Costa. And me and Alex Volkanovski had gone out back because we have like a team prayer before Israel went out and fought. So we were out with Israel before he was going out to that fight. So I come back, my manager's telling me the story. What? Brian Ortega just slapped this Korean kid. We got no idea what it's about. So, I just missed it. But this is a fight that's been in the making for a very long time. This is for the number one contender to see who's going to fight Alex Volkanovski first and Brian Ortega. Dominant, very dominant win. Now, watching the fight from mine, it was Ortega's understanding of rhythm that led to the win for him. And what I mean by that is again, for young fighters, this is a good fight to get an understanding of rhythm and timing. If you go back and watch this fight, they were touch, which means that they're setting, in any fight, there's some kind of rhythm that's getting established. The difference and the reason why Ortega was just landing the cleaner strikes is that he understood that the rhythm of the fight, and he was able to break that rhythm, whereas the Korean Zombie was on rhythm all night. And what I mean by that is they were like touch, and Korean Zombie would attack on rhythm. Touch, jab, touch, right hand, touch, kick. So if you're fighting and you're fighting the entire fight on rhythm, it's like Ortega knows the song. He knows the song that's playing. and he can dance along to it because he knows exactly when you're going to attack and when you're not going to attack. Whereas Ortega, I felt, understood that rhythm, touch, 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 bang, touch, 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 bang. Like he would play the rhythm game. He would set Ortega up for the rhythm. Then he would break the rhythm, and that's why he was able to outstrike the Korean Zombie from mine. So if you're a young fighter, go back and watch that and this is a good fight to get an understanding of timing and an understanding of rhythm and an understanding of breaking a rhythm. I feel like Ortega would have just had a deeper understanding because when Korean Zombie just comes forward like he usually does, it doesn't matter about rhythm. Like he's attacking on beat, off beat because he's just kind of swarming forward. But he reached a level or where Ortega had his respect, where Korean Zombie didn't want to just walk in, and he knew that he couldn't just eat the shots of Brian Ortega on the chin, so he had to give him a bit more respect, a bit more distance, and he wasn't used to fighting for a long period of time at that distance. But incredible victory from Brian Ortega, dominant 40-45, 50-45 across the scorecards, winning every round. Incredibly dominant win. So, man, I would love to see that. Alex Volkanovski, Brian Ortega. And I would also love to see, they haven't fought, have they? Chan Sung Jung and Max Holloway. I'm 90% sure. I'm going to double check. No. They haven't fought. I would love to see that fight. Korean Zombie versus Max Holloway. That would be one heck of a fight to watch. So those two fights are the fights that I want to see next in the featherweight division. Brian Ortega, Volkanovski, Chan Sung Jung versus Max Holloway. Okay, what's coming up internationally? The huge UFC 245. Justin Gaijin versus Khabib. Man, that's going to be one heck of a contest. We'll start. I'll go bottom to top for this one. Tai Tuivasa fights Stefan Struve. My man Tai Tuivasa. Hee-haw. So he's coming. Three fight lose streak for Tai, but I'm feeling like he's had a good camp from what I've seen online and social media, and he'll be able to kind of turn it around. Now he's going to be very good at getting in there and swinging on the taller man. Stefan Struve suffers from, being a taller fighter. I understand it myself. It was similar with like that James Vick. A lot of taller fighters, when you get in there and swing on them, they kind of freeze. Stefan Struve is a bit like one of those guys. So I feel like when Tai just gets in there, and this fight to me leans more towards Tai Tuivasa, because if he just gets in there and lets his hands go, I feel like the taller fighter in Stefan Struve is more likely to kind of freeze there in the headlights and get clipped with one of those bigger shots. So I feel like Tai is going to get back on the win streak in this one, and I cannot wait for that. Also on that card, Robert Whittaker, Jared Cannonier. From what Dana White's been saying as well, from what Israel's been saying, Jared Cannonier gets the win. He's the next one in line for the title shot. But Dana White's saying the winner of this fight is the next in line to get a title shot. So regardless of Whittaker or Cannonier, the next one in line, the winner of this fight gets the next title shot. And that's, to be honest, I haven't studied that much of Jared Cannonier. I've watched him I've obviously watched him fight, but there's a complete difference between watching someone fight and then legitimately like studying them as a fighter. And I feel like I've watched Jared Cannonier, but I haven't studied him yet. So to give a complete breakdown in that fight would be a bit difficult. But Robert Whittaker, absolute gun. I think he's one of the most well-rounded fighters, especially at middleweight. And I feel like this fight leans towards Robert Whittaker. I feel like he has more tools in the striking. From what I've seen, Jared Cannonier's pretty simple style. He's just a very powerful guy, very dangerous. But Robert Whittaker, fight from both stances, punches, kicks, everything. Mixes in his takedowns very well. So I feel like more tools in the tool shed for Robert Whittaker. Now, the main event, a quick talk about or Khabib versus Justin Gaijin. Now, this is a fight that I'm going to be watching very closely. It's Khabib versus Justin Gaijin. Early on, I'm talking months ago. I was like, Justin Gaijin, he's got that wrestling background, incredible cardio. He'll be able to weather that storm, be able to keep getting back to his feet and use that cardio, and he carries power very late into the fight. So he might be able to give Khabib one of the toughest tests of his career. But just as it draws closer, I've lost more and more faith in that original lookout of this fight, and that's purely because of this. If we go back and we look at Justin Gaethje's run to the title, so if we go back and we look at his entire UFC career, Michael Johnson, striker; Eddie Alvarez, striker; Dustin Poirier, striker; James Vick, striker; Edson Barboza, Donald Cerrone, Tony Ferguson. Now, these were all striking fights. So you're going to spend your entire UFC career against strikers, and then it comes to the coup de grace, the UFC title fight, and then you have to fight the best wrestler in the world. It's a very tall test. And if you go and look at the top 5 or 6 in the division, that's kind of how it looks. Dustin Poirier, Tony Ferguson, myself, we're all strikers. So your run to the title, you're leaning more towards striking based training camps, and then you get a title shot and you fight the best wrestler in the world. I feel like if the division was different, it would be more straightforward. It would make it a lot easier if the division was different, if the layout of the division was different, if it was the top 5 was wrestlers. It was Kevin Lee, Magachev, Gregor Gillespie, and you're fighting and you're doing predominantly wrestling training camps, and then you fought the champion with 3 or 4 back-to-back wrestling training camps. I feel like it would be a lot easier, but to shift the entire narrative from striking to wrestling in a 10-12 week period is a tall ask. And I feel like it's too tall of an ask for Justin Gaethje. And Khabib will be able to out-wrestle him quite handedly, is my lookout for that one. Okay, so now we're going to get into what's been happening in New Zealand. What's been happening in New Zealand this weekend? Now, I flew down to Dunedin for XFC45 in Dunedin. I got down there Friday morning, and I smashed my phone. So that's why I haven't posted anything online for a couple of days until I got back to Auckland yesterday. Lucky I have a phone sponsor, and I have another one sitting right here. So we're good as new. And I'm back in action. But XFC45 went down. I actually want to talk about what was 2 shows in one. We had XFC New Zealand, which is one of the biggest MMA shows in the country, go down. But before that, there was Bucket List. Now, Bucket List is an incredible concept that Matt Toa's put together, and this was their 6th event. So Bucket List 6. Now so from street to cage is 10 weeks. 10 weeks of training from street to cage, which is an incredibly tall ask. But man, it was good. I had my reservations, but I was out back warming my fighters up. But when I got out and looked, they were good fights. They were good, entertaining contests between 2 people. And as the name suggests, Bucket List, you want to get out there and tick it off your bucket list, or it's for so there was 2 kinds of people that wanted to just get it ticked off their bucket list. They wanted to dedicate themselves to it for 10 weeks, get in the cage, and tick it off their bucket list, or other young fighters that want to see if it's for them, and it's seeing if it's for them in such a short space of time. I think they had 14 weeks of training for this because of the coronavirus, and the show got moved another 4 weeks, so they had themselves an extra 4 weeks of training. So these guys had 14 weeks of training, but 10 weeks of training from street to cage. Now, I'm very interested if we would be able to do this in the North Island, if we would be able to do this in Auckland. or if they just breed him a little different from Dunedin. Because I was I was hesitant. You know, Matt was saying, oh, well, you should run a bucket list up in Auckland. So I want to know, do we have anyone game enough to get in there, train for 10 weeks, jump in the cage, and compete? So hit me up if you're keen to jump into bucket list. If I get enough interest, I would run the bucket list myself. I would love to do it. I would love to coach a good group of people, get them in the cage in 10 weeks. But I just need to know if people are interested. So I'm putting that out there. Hit me up if you're keen, and I will put it on the show. Okay, I'm gonna start top to bottom. XFC NZ, there were 3 titles on the line. Incredible show, incredible night of fights. Brogan Anderson defends his middleweight title against Cole Davis. First round Kimura. That now moves Brogan's record to 13-3. He's on a 5-fight win streak. 3 of those, or it could be 4, first round finishes. So that, he's ticking all the boxes to get himself inside the UFC. And let me tell you right now, the kid is a Dunedin superstar. He's walking out, he's got the whole crowd on their feet, and everyone's proud. He gets on the microphone, after his fight, and he makes his shot. He calls his shot for the UFC, and he's saying, we got ourselves a UFC fighter, first UFC fighter representing himself from Dunedin, and that's something that I would love to see. Brogan Anderson, one to watch. UFC need to sign this kid. UFC need to get in touch with Brogan Anderson. Next, moving our way to the co-main event, Matt Vale beats Sean Redgrave, second round TKO. Matt Vale getting on the, 6th. This is his 6th XFC title. That is incredible. 6 XFC bout, and he also has the Hex. Hex is another big show in Australia. He also has the Hex welterweight title. That moves him to 11-2 in his professional record, and I believe 6 first round stoppages. So the UFC had to be watching, the UFC matchmakers had to be watching this card, and I feel like the main event and co-main event of this show have made they need to be in the UFC. These boys need to be in the UFC. I felt like they're the next 2 in line, Brogan Anderson and Matt Vale, to be signed. And I cannot wait for them to get their opportunity in the big show. Third down the card was my fighter, Aaron Toe versus Caleb Lally. Took a little bit of time for the boys to figure each other out. Aaron moves to 3-0 as a professional with a decision win over Caleb Lally. Now this makes him the first fighter to be an amateur XFC champion and also a professional XFC champion. So he won the amateur title before he was with me, came over to me, turned professional, now undefeated as a professional, and the XFC bantamweight champion himself. So a huge feather in his cap for him. But in the fight, the boys took a bit of time to figure each other. Things started heating up halfway through that 3rd round. My coach Carl, because I was coaching against my coach Carl Weber, Caleb Lally's his boy. Now we're on the same page that this maybe should have been a 5-round fight, and the last 2 rounds would have started really heating up. But we said we'll have the last 2 rounds in the gym, and we'll let these boys really figure it out. But there's some big fights on the horizon for Aaron. Obviously, we have to wait until the borders open up. New Zealand, things are moving in New Zealand. We can now get to Australia, but getting back still have to quarantine. So we're almost there, but there's definite progression. And with this card altogether, it wasn't until my coach Carl Weber said this to me that I realized. He said, because he was getting real excited about, it was like the day before this, we're at weigh-ins, he's getting like real excited about this fight night going down. And it wasn't until he told me, I haven't cornered a fight since I cornered you for the Paul Felder fight in Auckland. And I was thinking, man, and I was thinking, running through my head, the amount of fights that I'd cornered between that Paul Felder fight and now, and I couldn't even count. So things have been moving up north, but down south, it was incredible to see this show happen. This is the first show down south in a very long very long time, and it's just incredible to see the wheels are moving in New Zealand. The wheels are moving, and these boys are getting the fights they need to get. Also on that card, I feel like in the amateurs, these are two boys that need to be talked about. Hakoraya Wilson, he beats Corey Shadboat, first round submission, and Fergus Jenkins, he beat his opponent Tommy Leone, first round submission as well. Now I actually think that these two boys are already set to fight. Hakoraya Wilson versus Fergus Jenkins, and that'll be one to watch in the amateur. This, in my opinion, is a skill for skill, is a professional level fight. This fight is a professional level fight. These boys and their skill sets are at that level. So it's that'll be an exciting one to see, and I'll keep you updated when that fight gets booked, because I'm not too sure which fight it's scheduled on, which fight night it's scheduled on. But we'll bring that up when the time comes around. Also on that night, I felt like this needed to be talked about a little more. Two more names got added to the New Zealand Hall of Fame. The New Zealand MMA Hall of Fame had two new additions in Jeff Todd and Peter Williamson. Now, if you're unaware, Peter Williamson, it was the first MMA fight in New Zealand, and it happened in Dunedin. So there's a lot of history with MMA in Dunedin. And Peter Williamson built the first cage in New Zealand, and it was a square cage. So they had a square cage, and he put an open invitation out for a 4-man, no holds barred tournament, which means bare knuckle, headbutts, the works. And now Chris Easy, he also entered the tournament. And in the first round of the 4-man, he beat a guy from Nelson. Pete beat a boxer from Dunedin. The two of them met in the final, Chris Easy versus Peter Williamson. And it went for 45 minutes straight. So this fight went to 45 minutes straight, and it ended with Chris Easy tapping out. The boys rematched in Auckland, and Chris TKO'd him in 2.5 minutes. But that, and I feel like it's important for the next generation to not only understand what's coming up, but also that New Zealand has a very rich history in MMA, and this was where it all started. So I feel like it needs to be acknowledged, and the younger generation need to be educated on their history. So that first MMA fight in New Zealand, Peter Williamson versus Chris Easley, 45 minutes long. I can only imagine that's an incredibly long time. Man, you think a five round fight. I think that's long. Well, 45 minutes, no time limit. Chris actually tapped out. I remember him telling me he was actually bored. He got it was at 45 minutes. He was like stuck on the bottom, couldn't get up. His head was jammed in the square corner of the cage, and he was stuck there for 45 minutes. So I think he was like, I wasn't actually that beat up. He was just like, I was just bored. 45 minutes, I got bored, tapped out, rematch. Anyway, knocked him out. But two new additions, need to know, Jeff Todd, Peter Williamson, to the New Zealand Hall of Fame for MMA. Also this weekend, there was a show up north, Knees of Fury. Now, man, I was busy with this show, so I didn't catch too many of the results there, but there was a professional MMA fight in the main event. Carlos the Flying Fijian Hicks suffered his first loss, and it was via, I think he posted his arm out when his opponent, Alex Tizvanos, came for a takedown. He posted his arm out and dislocated his elbow. So Alex Tavanos with the first round victory there over Carlos Hicks at the Knees of Fury show. Now, I wish I had the other results. I wish someone had posted up the other results or some videos so I could have watched and talked about it. But hopefully I'll be able to rewatch the show and talk about those results in the following week. I think I've covered everything there. Time for some Twitter questions. We'll get into our Twitter questions. Hopefully I'm able to answer. Okay. Kappa Scrapper, outside of Aaron, who were you most impressed with on XFC. And who would you match? Brogan, Aaron, and Matt up against next, assuming it's an Anzac promotion. Although I'd love to see all three have a crack in a major promotion. I think they're young lads, Fergus, Jensen, and Hakoraya Wilson. That's why I brought them up on the show. I feel like they were very impressive. Two very impressive early dominant victories. So those are my guys that I was most impressed with. Brogan and Matt. Anyone. At that level and where these boys are at, the pool's getting shallower and shallower. So I think we need to bring some Aussies over and give these boys a crack at some Australian opponents. Aaron, I feel like there's still fights for him here in New Zealand. Logan, he won on Shuriken a couple of weeks and he brought up Aaron's name. They've fought before. It was a 2-round fight, so a 2 5-minute round on King of the Ring. So I'd love to see those two boys compete in a 5-round fight. Or even a rematch for Aaron against Caleb Lally. I would be open to both of those fights. But yeah, I still feel like there's fights for Aaron left in New Zealand. The other two, Brogan and Matt, I feel like they need to be in there with the world's best. These boys are of that level and they need a crack at a major promotion. Milton Mango. Who would you book? Zombie next. What are your thoughts on the Volk Ortega matchup? Yeah, Volk. Zombie first. I think Holloway. The loser fights loser, winner fights winner. That's the way the UFC works, and that's the way it moves forward. Volk versus Ortega. Have to spend a little bit more time looking at it. But Ortega's striking looked head and shoulders above what it's been in the past. So I feel like if Volk versus Ortega that striking matchup would be incredibly high level. So both of those fights will look. Angus Judson, why don't we see spinny shit from you in the octagon? It's just not what I do. It's just not what I do. If I spin, it will look like Chris Weidman getting knocked out by Luke Rock. It's just not what I do. I keep my feet on. You ever see me jump in the air either? You see me spin or jump? It's not what I do. I don't carry a briefcase and walk into an office and sit down and try and type. That's not what I do. I don't jump. I don't spin. I put these up and swing them. That's my thing. This I thought was funny. I was looking through the questions, and you know how you scroll right to the bottom and it goes like show abusive or like swearing. I always click on that. That's where the gems are. But I scrolled down to that. I clicked on it, and all that showed up was Stylebender versus John Jones, and that was like in the abusive content department. That must be because of like all the abusive back and forth that John Jones and Israel had with each other, that they've now just capped themselves. Twitter has designated them as abusive. Bloody hilarious. Keith Peterson, KP Peterson, UFC. Do you think Gaijin will be able to get Khabib tired by letting him punch him in the face? Asking for a friend. Nah. You them 4-ounce. The UFC 4-ounce glove is an entirely different beast. That thing is a rock. I don't think that's why you see Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belts can't throw a punch and they just swing their arm out and still get knockouts because those gloves are rocks. So I don't feel like you can let anyone punch you in the head. Boom. Ooh, this is a good question. UFC, Dunedin, inevitable, 100%. 100% that has to happen at some stage. Dunedin, MMA is massive. I feel like the people love it down there. Forsyth Bar Stadium. UFC pay-per-view. I feel like this is inevitable when borders open up. That's 30,000 people in a covered stadium. You could bring down a huge show, Stylebender versus someone, myself, Alex, Brad, throw us all on there, stack a card out, and I think that thing would sell out. I think Forsyth Bar Stadium in Dunedin would sell out with 30,000 people. Trust me, I mark my words, this is going to happen, and it's definite. It's definite. 100% Dana White, this thing will sell out. You need to do it. Last question. MMA gone wild. On a scale from 1 to 10, how hungover were you on your flight back from Dunedin? 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. Shocked I even made the airport. Also, can you use some of your win bonuses to buy your mate's shoes who got barefoot on an airport? That was my gym's official tour manager, Sai. He only brought orange jandals to Dunedin. That was his only choice of footwork. On the night out, he broke his jandals, so he was then barefoot for the following day, walking through the airport barefoot. So lucky a couple fans spotted us, but that's my official tour manager. He learned his lesson. He'll get some sturdier footwear for our next trip. But thanks for checking out the podcast. Catch you next week. Thank you.